The worst thing that you can do is go to a relationship manager and say, how much money do I qualify for? If that's the case, I don't know, but you're not qualifying for any money here. To give some examples, if we're looking at a retail location, you got to factor in rent. Typically, it's 6 months to a year. Working capital, you're going to hire employees. And in addition to that, utilities, legal expenses, inventory, which is a different category, but you can factor that in. That's allowable for SBA.
Give a little bit of your background and experience within the lending space as it pertains to small businesses.
So my name is Kendro Benjamin. I'm a senior relationship manager at Dime Community Bank. Dime's been around since 1864. We have about 60 branches between Montauk and Manhattan. Myself personally, I've been in banking for the better of 20 years, SBA lending, 15 years. I've been with Dime for about 5 years. So I've been doing SBA financing for the bulk of my career. What brings us here today, I was, SBDC at Farmingdale was nice enough to invite me to do a presentation to the advisors.
Yes.
And, I just gave what I thought should be common knowledge, which really isn't, with regard to SBA. And I do take advantage of that because I have been doing it for so long. So I think that everybody should know, but unfortunately that's not the case, and that's why I'm here today.
It was an interesting thing for me coming in from a position of owning my own small business, a couple from state to state to state, and not really understanding the difference. Like for me, in my perspective, like a business loan's a business loan.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just go to a bank and you've got to pitch them on your business, and then so I knew nothing about that side. Just to make that story clear, the purpose of it, I knew nothing. And Jeff, we brought Jeff on today. The audience should remember Jeff from his very own podcast episode, where he talked a lot about the franchise that he started, I guess you would say. I don't know the right verbiage. Bought. There we go. And Jeff, you also have a ton of experience in the banking world. If you wouldn't mind letting the audience know kind of like your background.
Sure. Basically, my background is I'm a degreed accountant. I worked in public accounting at the beginning of my career, and just about 5 years ago also, I went back, and it reminded me why I left it in the first place, tax seasons. But basically, so I have an accounting background, and I decided to own my own business, and I looked into various businesses, and I wanted to start a business where it would be fun. My wife and I always enjoyed going to the movies. We were movie addicts, and the video industry was about 10 years old at the time, and I said, all right, let's do that. And I researched it, and I saw that franchising was the way to go because they have a much higher success rate. And so I bought a video franchise, and we took it from there. We had it for 10 years, and it was a lot of fun to work there. I had my entire family working there, my wife, my father, my daughters, their friends, and it was great. After I sold the store, I figured, what am I going to do now? And speaking to a very close friend of mine who is a CPA, said, you get the perfect background to be a relationship manager for a bank. And
that sounds like a nice job. Like it sounds like, oh, I get to manage relationships. Like I love the names and the titles for jobs.
Yeah.
The first job I had when I got out of the Army was as a salesperson in demand generation, but I was a business development executive.
Oh,
and I was like, oh,
sounds fancy.
Oh, I like the sound of this. And I get up to work and I was like, oh, I'm a salesman.
Yes.
I got it. All right.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And in banking, the position that Kendro has and what I had at the time, every bank might call it slightly different.
Sure.
Some of them are SBRM, small business relationship managers, or BRMs, business relationship managers. And I never considered it sales, to tell you the truth, because people needed loans, and that was my job, to try and get them their lending for their business. So I never really looked at it as sales, even though the bank does. Mm-hmm. So, it was a little conflicting there.
So the reason why I wanted to make sure that we turn this into a 3-person podcast is because Kendro is current in the business, SBA specialized, and is going to be able to give us that real kind of behind the scenes, maybe, and as you were saying, shouldn't be behind the scenes kind of knowledge and information that's really important. And we're going to tackle multiple different subject areas here. We'll be talking about startups. We'll be talking about established businesses. If we have time, we'll get into franchises and the ins and outs of acquiring a current business that is established already. And I wanted to make sure that we brought Jeff on because I can come at this from the perspective of a novice, a new small business owner that's coming from more of the online information-based perspective, low startup costs. But Jeff having his own experience with business and having a huge amount of experience in banking as well is going to be able to ask some of those questions that I'm not capable of asking because I don't have the experience.
And the ironic thing is, I did get an SBA loan when I started my business.
And how long ago was that?
That was 1990.
Yeah.
And it must have been like a 7A at the time. It was $250,000. I did the build out with that money and also purchased the inventory. And without it, I couldn't have gotten started.
Yeah, that's huge. And you think about it, and like what was your experience with business ownership before that?
Nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that is a great segue into our very first topic where we're going to be talking about startups. So right off the bat, how do you guys manage startups? Is there space for a startup to come in and seek lending through your organization?
So given the current market, times have changed, right? It was a lot easier before to finance startups. In Dime, we're doing it less so now, but that's not to say you couldn't go to another financial institution and get the financing that you're looking for. But in terms of going into a branch, right, a lot of it's really just homework. You want to make sure, one, you know how much you're looking for, right? And that amount is founded, right? It's not just a best guess. You want to make sure your business plan is buttoned up, I's dotted, T's crossed. You want to make sure your projections make sense and your assumptions to the projections make sense. You want to make sure that, you've checked your credit, right? You get a free credit report once a year, at least. Just take a look at it and make sure there are no inaccuracies. Make sure that all the information that's presented is correct. And then really I couldn't tell you the likelihood of getting approved or not, but if you do your homework and you come to any bank or you approach any relationship manager and you have those things, it'll increase exponentially your chance of being approved.
Yeah, that's powerful. There's so much value in the list that you just provided. And so I want to dissect kind of each one of those major components so that way that the audience really understands all of the components that they need to be thinking about now well in advance of seeking that loan. So let's start. The first thing you talked about is understanding how much money you specifically need.
Correct.
Let's pick an industry. Your choice.
Retail.
Okay. So if somebody wanted to start a retail-based business, what are the kind of categories? And Jeff, please, by all means, jump in here as well. What kind of things do they need to be considering when it comes to this component? When it comes to the costs to start up, and this can even help us go into a conversation of kind of working capital versus startup costs and all of that, because I know that creates different lending options as well.
Yes. Yeah. I'll answer that, but before I get into that, the worst thing that you can do is go to a relationship manager and say, how much money do I qualify for? Right. It just, if that's the case, I don't know, but you're not qualifying for any money here. That's why it's so important to do your homework and to answer your question. If we're looking at to give some examples, if we're looking at a retail location, right, you got to factor in rent, right? The SBA allows for rent. Typically, it's 6 months to a year. Working capital, you're going to hire employees. How much is that going to cover? Okay, so you're going to hire maybe 2 employees when you start, and then after that, right, given your projections, how many more employees 3 months from there, 6 months from there? So you got to factor that in. In addition to that, utilities, legal expenses, inventory, which is a different category, but you can factor that in. That's allowable for SBA financing.
Okay.
So it's things like that you gotta, you'd have to consider before asking for a loan.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I find that most of the clients that come in looking for lending, they really haven't done their homework.
Yeah.
It's like the first thing they say to me is, "How much can you get me?" And I say, "I don't get you anything.
Yeah.
I'm going to help you apply for it."
Yes.
But
yes.
they have a business idea. It's a dream. A lot of them tell me, and I understand that because I went through that myself.
Yeah, I think there can be a misconception, especially for people in the startup space, when they're thinking about it, because when you go to get a personal loan, that's kind of what you do.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
show up. Now you don't even show up, just make a phone call, or you go to like the messaging thing.
Yeah.
Like, I would like money, please. Can I get money? And they're like, yeah, at a really high interest rate. Take it. One of the things that I definitely want to dive into that you had mentioned in this kind of subtly, and that you picked up on as well, Jeff, is the business plan.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to take a look and spend some time there. But before we go there, I know that there are people that are watching right now that are like, just tell me the credit score I need to have. Like, just what is that prerequisite in order to actually have that conversation? So I guess if we break this conversation down into two different portions and we look at it as like, what do I need to focus on before I walk in, before I even consider making the phone call? And then what do I need to make sure that I'm doing, kind of closer, like once I'm communicating or working with the bank?
Mhm.
And so what do I need to have a Kendro? Not like, hey, nice story, you have to do this work for the next 6 months. So what are those things? Let's go ahead and start with a credit score.
Sure. So SBA really doesn't have a minimum credit score. Banks do, right? For the most part. So typically, on the safe side of banks looking for a credit score of about 680 and above.
Okay.
Now, we look past the score in and of itself. We've approved financing for people that have had 550. But reason being would be, for an example, this woman in particular, she had a whole bunch of student loan debt, and they were deferred. But on her credit report, the deferred payments were showing as late payments. Theoretically, she had no late payments. So we were able to look behind the number and get her approved for financing. But, again, if you want to be on the safe side, typically if you're going to approach any bank, you want to have a credit score of 680. Likewise, you'd also want to make sure that you clean up if you have existing debt, that's a non-starter. You have to clean that up. If you have any current debt within the past or delinquencies within the past year or two, you want to kind of be further away from that. If it's recent than that, then that could be problematic.
Got it. So it's not just the score.
Even
If your score is a 680, or say it's even a 700, 720,
Correct.
There are other components of credit, like credit markers almost, that you're going to be looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And so debt to income ratio?
So we do have more of a global perspective, and
Okay.
that factors in, debt cash, business cash flow,
Got it.
personal cash flow,
Okay.
business debt, and personal debt.
Okay.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah, please.
So there's a transaction that kind of fighting for, but the problem is the gentleman's a real estate investor, right? So he happened to buy a lot of real estate in 2023. So the debt is reported there on his credit report, but the income hasn't been reported on his taxes as of yet.
Got it.
So I told him, hey, look, we're trying to fight for this deal. So once you've done your 2023 personal tax returns, and there it's going to show the income that's coming in, because right now, we have what he's telling us, and credit just needs to be more secure, with that. So that's what we're asking for is, hey, we're going to put the application on hold right now. We're going to as soon as you file your 2023 tax returns, send it to us. Because right now, his personal liabilities, it's what's really killing the deal.
Got it. I think, Jeff, you've worked with some clients, and I know that we've co-counseled some clients when it's come up where we need to do a pause. Like we need to pause and do some work.
Right.
Can you recall any of those?
Yeah. There's one client that I saw that was referred to me from a bank, basically, and it's a pizza place. And they're new owners. It's two people who are partners, and they're new owners, and the place is thriving. But the problem is they haven't been in business 2 years, so they don't have enough of financial history for us to start reviewing. And we didn't consider it a startup because, well, they don't consider it a startup because they bought an existing business. And I went there in person, and the place was rocking. It really was.
Wow.
I actually sat out in front of the place 10 minutes before the appointment. It was lunchtime. I wanted to see how many boxes are going out. I mean, I counted 20 boxes going out in like 10 minutes.
Within 10 minutes.
There you
Yeah,
go.
lunchtime. But the thing is, they just didn't have a financial history. And they said that their first year, they showed a small loss. Second year, which is 2023, they're showing income. And they're doubling the revenue from the previous year. So I said, you're headed in the right direction, but let's wait till 2023 tax returns are there because that's your strong point to apply for this loan. Without that, you're dead in the water. They weren't too happy with that answer, and that happens quite a bit, but it's not what they wanted to hear, but it's the way to go. And so I told them, let's put you on hold for now, get your tax returns prepared as soon as possible, and we'll take a look at it.
There you go. I want to play a game. Are you guys ready? Are you excited?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. So I'm going to ask a question, and I want you guys to both respond with 1 to 2 words max.
Okay.
All right. And it's just one question, and I want you to do it at the same time as soon as I ask it. All right. When you receive a business plan from a potential client, what is the first section of the business plan that you look at?
Summary.
I start from the beginning.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do.
That is not the answer I expected from either one of you. That's great. So why? Why do you, Kendra, why do you start at the summary?
Well, because I want to see what in essence, kind of, why are we here? You know, what's the purpose? What has led this person to this point to come and apply for a loan? I want to know the history, the background of it.
I start from the beginning because I'm reading it like I know nothing about your business. And I want to see if you're making it clear from the very beginning what the business is. I'm trying to look at it as a banker, not so much as a small business development business advisor, because it's going to be handed to a banker who's going to hand it to an underwriter. So I want to know from the beginning, what type of business is this? Like we never spoke before. And I start off that way.
We're going to play this game, and we're going to play it until I get the answer that I want. So, what is the next most important section that you want to look at?
Use of proceeds.
I would say the summary, like he said before. So I go in order, but I'm itching to go start looking at numbers already.
Yes, yes, and that's where I wanted to go because
that's my background. So
yeah,
I'm ready to start looking at numbers.
Yeah, that's almost one of the first things. Like from my perspective, I go straight to the financial section because at that point I've already worked with the client. Like it's not frequent that a client comes up and is like, I have a business plan, come check it out.
Yeah.
You know, if that's the case, then I'm starting from the beginning and we're going to have a counseling session anyway. But so I want to go there because I'm like, have you done the work financially to figure out how this works? Obviously you have to know like what business it is so you can understand the numbers you're looking at.
Yes.
So that's good. It's a very good point.
Yeah.
I was putting the cart ahead of the horse. So when it comes to projections, maybe Jeff, you kind of break down projections, if you wouldn't mind, and then I want to shift to Kendro, and if you wouldn't mind backing up Jeff with a description of assumptions and what are assumptions, why they're important to projections.
Right. Well, projections are just that. These are numbers that you're pulling out of a hat, basically. I want to see what hat you're using. How did you come up with this increase in this amount of revenue from month to month? I want to see if you covered all your expenses. Are there any expenses that are first being used just to start the business, and then what your current expenses are going to be? So I want to see that they're thinking like a business person at this point, and it's all making sense. I don't want to see any projections where you're just having 10% increases every month. You know, I don't care what
It's the
type
number one sign that you didn't think through
Right.
the financial projections.
Exactly. Now, I understand that these are made up numbers, but they have to come from somewhere. But also, every business has some type of up and down seasons, and that has to be shown in the projections. You know, let's say you're a landscaper, so you're struggling in the winter. Maybe you're supplementing your income by doing snow removal, things like that. But basically, your landscaping business is going to take a nosedive in those months, and I want to see that, and that's being realistic. And I point that out to them because that's what the bank is going to look at. And, you know, that's where they're going to make their decision. So a lot of thought has to go into the projections, and the assumptions are your backup. Basically, how did you come to that assumption?
Right. And I mean, and it comes
That number, I mean.
and I want to backtrack from there after Kendro hits us up on the assumptions and all of that to the capital requirements kind of worksheet, if you will. So we'll cover that and then we'll move on from this topic. But so when you're making, Jeff had kind of alluded to some of these assumptions, but if you want to dive a little bit deeper into, because it's not just you're making an assumption in your head, like these are written down assumptions that are going with your, like the graphs and charts that are showing your growth. Like Jeff was saying, like people are putting 10% growth every month. Underneath that chart, you have these assumptions like, this is why I'm assuming I'm going to grow 10% every month. And whatever those assumptions are, they're poor because that math doesn't add up. So they have to be interrelated, right? Okay.
So just to dive a little bit deeper to what Jeff was saying, and I'll use the pizza business that you had mentioned earlier. I mean, when we're looking at it, right, where is it located, right? Is it on a nautical mile? So then your summers generally will have more revenue than your winters. Or maybe it's not, right? Then maybe your winters have more revenue than your summers because people are on vacationing summers, people are going to the beach. So all that stuff's got to be factored in. If there's seats in said restaurant, what's the turnover? What's the turnover during lunch? What's the turnover during dinner? You know, things of that. What are the hours? Are you serving lunch? You know, is it Monday through Sunday? Is it just during the week? So a lot of that stuff's got to be thought out. Got to be thought out. And that's generally because with SBA, we'd only really need projections and assumptions. And it's good to have in any request, but generally startups. So for businesses in operations 2 years or less, it's a requirement.
Okay.
Yeah. And to back that up is really the assumptions, which kind of explains and say, hey, you know what? Well, we've got, you know, an uptick in revenue during June. Well, the assumption, why is that? The assumption will answer and say, oh, because, you know, we're located on a nautical mile and, you know, summer months are busier months for us. So, okay, so that makes sense, but there's got to be thought behind the numbers.
Right.
Right. And, you know, when you're dealing with a startup, I try to tell people, even if you're not looking for a loan, write a business plan anyway, because you're going to use that business plan as a guide as you open your business. And you're going to make changes to the plan because you're going to learn a lot more about your business than you ever thought. And I'll give you an example. When I started my business, it's a video store, okay? So basically, I knew the winters would probably be my best month, okay? But the other months, I wasn't too sure about. But it wound up being not the best time of the best time for video was the winter. It was second best. The first was the summer, believe it or not. And it blew me away that was what was happening. What's happening is that, number one, kids are out of school, okay? So they're home. They're spending a lot of time at home. They're watching things on TV. At that time when I had the business, there was no streaming videos or anything like that. All you saw in the summer were reruns on television.
Gotcha.
So
old reruns too,
exactly.
right? Yeah.
So they needed something to watch at night, and they would rent a video. They would come in and rent the video for the adults and some kiddie movies for the kids to keep them occupied. Now, the worst months were actually September when kids go back to school. All the new TV programs come back. Okay. So you're dead in the water at that point, you know.
So how much of that did you know prior to starting versus once you were actually established and up and running and then you experienced it?
I was wrong. I was wrong as to when I will be busy.
Yeah.
I mean, the spring you start getting busy. The fall you drop like a rock once school starts. Really,
Yeah. And you still, I mean, given you were inside of a franchise, but you were still successful.
Yeah.
Even though your assumptions were wrong about when and how that comes
You
into place,
adjust.
you
Yeah.
still got the
Yeah.
loan, an SBA loan at
Yeah.
that, and you were able to still make it work. So it's not, I think what happens, especially when we start getting into numbers, people get sort of, I hate using this word, but people get like triggered by math.
Yeah.
Right. And so they get really scared. Sarah's over
Right.
there agreeing. And I get it because it can be overwhelming, especially when you're talking about percentages and these numbers and understanding a projection. Like, what do you mean I just make it up? Like, well, you don't just make it up. It's coming from something, and a lot of it will come from your capacity. Like, and that goes to what you were saying, like, what hours are you open and doing business for? How many people are in the business in that pizza shop that are actually putting pizzas together? How many people are working out the dough?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so how many can we actually produce? Of those, how many can we actually sell?
What's important
So-
also, though, is that if it's a business they're starting that they have experience in, like I'm getting
Great
a lot of
point.
Key, yeah.
people now, women mostly, opening up these spas,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to make them an exclusive spa. They call them bars. Actually, it's a spa/bar. And I didn't know what that meant because I never went to a spa. I thought maybe you're serving liquor, but that's not the case.
That's where my head went. I was like, they have wine? Is this what's happening?
What it means in that industry, they told me, is that besides doing facials and things like that, they'll do your nails, they'll do your hair, they'll do a lot of aspects.
A one-stop shop. kind of.
Exactly. And,
Okay.
but if you don't have experience doing that, of course you're going to hire people, but you don't have the background to put together the business plan or the projections. And, experience means a lot.
The more dynamic, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, either of you, the more dynamic your business is, or the more, I don't know if you would call them internal verticals for your business, where you're like, okay, well, we have the nails and we have this. And it's not like every person coming in is going to get every service every
correct,
single time. And so then you have to account for that, like, well, okay, how many people are going to get a package? How many people are going to get this? And if, to exactly your point, if you don't have experience in kind of each one of those, it would be hard to do it individually. And then you put it all together under one roof and you're trying to make these projections and assumptions for that. So it can get complicated pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Experience when it comes to getting the loan. So I'm a veteran, right? And I work with a lot of veterans that come in that are looking to start their own business, or maybe they already have. A big problem for us, and this isn't just exclusive for veterans. It matches with a lot of people that just hate what they do, and they're trying to do the thing that they love, but they don't have professional experience doing it. So when somebody comes to you and they're seeking a loan, how significant does professional experience have in that endeavor?
If I may. So when you say professional experience, you mean like direct experience?
Right. So if
Okay.
and that's an important aspect to talk about too. I don't think this is exactly what you were saying, but it just made me think about it. So if we go back to the pizza shop, example, how do you view somebody that goes to the pizza shop all the time, really enjoys pizza, right? And they want to start their pizza shop. And then you have another person that's like made the pizzas, worked through the dough, understands like the actual like kitchen working process. And then you have managers, right, who are, in my head, that would be like the obvious ideal candidate of the three, because they're managing inventory and stock and running shifts and finances and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right? It's a good point. Personally, through my career, I kind of have an unwritten rule. So typically, if a startup's looking for financing and the person, if they've got 2 years direct experience, that's kind of the minimum that I look for.
Got it.
If they have 4 or 5 years of indirect experience, so maybe they work at I don't know, Snapple, and they're delivering the pizza shops on one of their routes, and they kind of see it what's going. And I would kind of consider that indirect experience, right? So that's kind of the guideline that I, kind of came up with.
Okay.
But if it's indirect experience, that business plan's got to be buttoned up, because at this point, you got to prove, hey, look, might not necessarily have direct experience, but I've thought through all these scenarios and things, and I've interviewed, right, current pizza shop owners or the guys that are on my route. So it's more than just kind of being passive, right? You got to be in there. You got to roll up your sleeves and talk to people, interview people, and try and really get to do your homework. You know?
That's true. When I was looking to start my business and when I decided on the franchise, so it was basically a franchise that was based in Philadelphia. So they had a number of stores throughout the Philadelphia area and in New Jersey. So when I decided to go with them, I got a list of all the stores in New Jersey. And I planned a weekend trip where I went to 5 different stores over a weekend. And I called beforehand so I'd get to see the owner. And I just wanted to get a feel for what the store was like. Are you turning a profit at this point? How long does it take to start turning a profit? Now you got to realize that type of business, you're starting from zero, and it's a membership business. So you're trying to attract people to come in to become members where they'll be repeat customers. And I wanted to see all that. Besides doing that, while they were building out my store, which took about a month, there was a local store from that franchise, but they were a company store. It wasn't a franchise. So I went into them and I asked for the manager and I said, I'd like to work here for a couple of weeks for free. I said, I just purchased a franchise from the same business, the same company. I want to be behind the counter for 2 weeks before I go into my store. And sure enough, I learned a tremendous amount just by being behind that counter. And I was doing it 3 to 4 nights a week. They loved it that they didn't have to pay me, of course. But I was gaining tremendous experience. Yes. And I was so impressed with the manager there that I told her, I'm opening up in about 4 weeks. I said, you need a job, you come right to me. Yeah. And sure enough, a month after I opened, she came walking in the door. And she was with me for the entire 10 years we were in business, and we still stay in touch now.
That's incredible. I mean, what you're talking about is kind of creating your own master's graduate program, like on your own, and because that's what happens. Like the difference between somebody that gets a bachelor's degree versus a master's degree is really like, yeah, you take some more advanced classes, but it's really like the hours that you're spending in the industry. It's like you have to intern, you have to go to these places and work for free.
There's nothing like experience.
And it's because that is why a master's really sets somebody apart from a bachelor's, and that's what you're talking about. It's like you have to earn your business master's in order to show up to somebody like Kendro and be able to have it buttoned up, have that business plan buttoned up in a way, because if you never operated inside of it, especially from the perspective of a manager, or if you haven't at least, like you said, Kendra, I tell people to fake like they have podcasts all the time as a tool to interview people in those positions. Like go into a place like, I really love this. I'm starting a podcast. I'd love to interview you. Like, would you be interested in doing so? And most people enjoy talking about themselves. Yes. And so they're like, yeah, I'd love to share my story. And so then you have that conversation with them and you get to learn about what it's like. Cause you don't want to come off as seeming like competition, like I'm coming out. I'm opening up a pizza shop
store right next to yours, and I'm taking all your customers.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's good. And man, it was great. In my head, I had a really good segue from startups to established businesses.
But if I may,
please.
One thing I wanted to mention, and you alluded to earlier, with regard to math. Look, at the end of the day, this exercise isn't one to kind of keep you away from starting your business and seeing your dream to fruition. At the end of the day, the bank or any financial institution's really taking a guarantee, right? So you're doing the work mainly for yourself. So with that personal guarantee, should anything happen, the bank's most likely going to file a judgment against you. The bank isn't going to be like, you know what, we tried. That's not how it works. And yes, granted, there is an SBA guarantee that's there. But if there's any overage, if there's any money that's left, I mean, a judgment will be filed, and at some point you would have to pay that. pay that loan off or that obligation off.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in your best interest to do as much as you can, knowing that, hey, you know what, then nothing is guaranteed, but I've crossed my T's and dotted my I's, and I 90% efficiency would know that, hey, you know what, I'm able to get this financing, I can do this and be successful. So again, it's not an act in which to try and not let you succeed, but hey, we don't want to be in a situation where the business goes bad, and it does happen. Most startups do go bad, right? So, ergo, that's why you want to do your business plan, projections, know how much you need before really making that leap to
You
applying.
want to look at there are resources out there to help you with it, and to toot our own horn, we're one of them.
Yes.
And that's why the relationship we have with you is based on our relationships that we have with our clients.
But when I talk to a client for the first time and they're telling me about their business, I want to hear the passion in their voice.
Yeah.
If I don't hear passion, then I tell them, look, it doesn't sound like you're really into this. You might have had a thought about it,
Right.
but I want to hear passion. You're telling me it's your dream. I want to hear your dream.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's an
And
interesting-
convince me and show that in the business plan.
There's an interesting component of when clients come in and they go, I just want to start a business. Like, I don't know what it is, but I know I want to start it. And I'm like, listen, I'll work with you too.
Yes.
But there's something about having the passion. Like, this is what I've wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I've done research into it. And even after doing the research, my passion is still high, but passion isn't enough. It is required, I believe, for those successful businesses, but it's definitely not enough. And that's why you have to have the plan. That's why you have to develop the plan.
You need the passion and the money.
Yeah, well, and that's a really good point. So this goes into understanding a little bit more depth on the business plan, which this is the segue. See,
Okay.
I needed some space
You
in order to do it.
You're welcome.
So yeah, I know exactly. What can I say? Okay, thanks, Rock. So capital requirements.
Yeah.
I think that this is a very good conversation for both startups and established businesses when they're going to a bank and discussing what they want. Is you don't go, to your point, you don't go in there and say, or Jeff, maybe you said it, like, you don't go in and ask, like, how much money can I get?
Yeah.
You go in with a very specific number, and this is a lot tighter. This is not projection style. This is per category what I need the money for. And so what are you looking for if somebody has what format are you expecting it in? Is there a particular format? And what are some of the things maybe that people typically miss when they're trying to send you like a capital requirements document?
Yeah. So, if it's a startup, again, 2 years or less in operations, then we would need minimally a 10% equity contribution, right? And that's kind of SBA standard. Some banks might want more.
Some want 20.
Yeah, some banks may want 20. Dime, we pretty much, follow the SBA Bible, which is the SOP, Standard Operating Procedure. So we're 10%, right? And that can come in several ways. I don't want to get into the nuances now, but for the most part, we would look to see that, the principal has that equity. And it could be a loan from a 401k. It could be savings. It could be a gift. I literally just closed on a optometrist. It was a business acquisition. It was 3 principals. One of them had the equity he pulled out from a home equity loan.
Oh, wow.
And put, towards it. So that can be kind of, carved up depending on what we're looking at. But if it's a startup, typically they have savings of that 10%. And that's generally what we would look for. That would be the bare minimum requirement. In terms of applying for, the financing that they need, SBA does have categories like working capital, and there's a bunch of things that fall under that. Then there's inventory, there's equipment, there's you're not going to really see this on a startup, but you can do debt refinance with an SBA 7A. So, which is different than an existing business, over 2 years in operations. We don't need there's no equity requirement there. For the most part, under a 7A loan.
Okay.
Right. We can do a 504, which is 10%, but that's really for the purchase of real estate or, equipment and leaseholds. But under a 7A, if we have a business that's been around for 2.5 years and they want to expand, right? They want to open up another location. They want to refinance some debt. They want to hire some people. They want to buy more. If it's an Amazon business, they want to buy more inventory because that inventory turns right into, revenue,
Right.
So there's no capital requirement then.
For the established businesses that have that. And so this kind of goes, one of the things that I'll tell clients, and Jeff, you chime in here as well to let me know how you counsel, is look at the categories of the business plan, right? And just categorically and make sure that you have dollar amounts assigned for each thing, Like if we're talking operations,
Yes.
like how much are your operations going to cost? Okay, let's break it down. Like goes into personnel, that goes to management, you go to inventory and things like that. And, one of the things that I try to help people understand, one of my areas of specialty is marketing and branding. And so I try to help them to see different things, like a lot of their startup activities that they would think fall under operations will actually fall under marketing. And like to get, if you're doing percentage discounts, buy one, get one half off, that kind of a thing, like that, if you're incurring a cost from promoting the business, from getting yourself out there, that can go under marketing instead of your operations. And so then your budgets look different, right? And at the end of the day, you want to work through, this is the amount of inventory that I'm going to need on hand. Can I do it by myself for the first 3 months? Do I need like a couple other people? Okay. How much is that going to cost as far as hourly wages and things like that? And so all of those, adding up all of these different bylines and having it listed out as like, these are the things that are actually costing me this money, and this is why I'm going to need that much. It's actually a really good marker of viability, feasibility, in the sense of like, do I have 10%? From the startup perspective, like, do I have, do I need $350,000? All right. Do I have 35K? Like in the bank? Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. Maybe there are other ways to do it. Maybe you can start up smaller without the brick and mortar, And so it kind of forces you to get a little, it can put you in a position where you have this negative, like, oh my gosh, there's no way. Like, there's no way I can do this. And feels bad, but it's really good. Because the last thing you want is to, maybe a bank gives you the money and you're like, oh no, what do I do now? Versus building up to it. Like, okay, well, I'm gonna make some brick oven pizzas at the house because we invested that at the house, but I'm gonna take them and I'm gonna do this at like a farmer's market. And then there are actually people that are really interested or whatever.
Right. And I encourage people, if they start off selling a product online, to stay online right now. Why incur the expenses of having a brick and mortar place, rent expense, utilities,
e-commerce is
really, if you're doing well now, I'd say stick with it for at least a year and let's see how it goes. If the revenue's coming in and you want to have an actual place in a strip shopping center, then that's the time to do it. But right now, you're going to bury yourself in opening costs, and that's going to be tough.
So I'm going to do a shift. That's a really good point, Jeff. That's a really good point. I want to shift into, unless there's anything else that either one of you want to just like make a comment about when it comes to startups or things that they need to consider.
Well, with especially with the SBA loans, I know a lot of times they want collateral in addition to the 10%, and a lot of times that's your home. And that hit me like a rock when I started my business, getting the SBA loan. They said, we're ready to approve you, but we need to use your house as collateral.
You probably hit your wife with a larger rock.
Whatever equity you have. And I said, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. And when I told my wife about that, things got even worse. But, we thought it through and we said, come on, let's do it. And basically we did it. And I paid off the loan and basically they didn't take my house.
Yeah, you still have the house.
And it worked out. But, that's a scary thing,
And that's a great point. Far too often, right, am I getting phone calls and I'm having the initial conversations with the applicant or prospect, and I tell every initial conversation, I ask them about their home, right? Do you own a home? Do you own any type of real estate, right? Yes. Okay. We're going to take that for collateral. That's going to be our collateral. Well, why do you need the home? Well, because there's not enough assets in the business. The SBA deeply discounts business assets. So in a situation like that, which is 99.99% of the time, we're taking the home as collateral if it's available, And
that's a good point. What does that mean?
Well, my response is, hey, look, this is your business. We're not equity partners here, so if you're not willing to back up this request, your business with your home, then why should we be on the hook for it?
That's a really interesting perspective. What options have you either seen or does Dime even specifically offer when it comes to somebody that wants to start a business bank account? I know that I've talked with some financial institutions in the past, and they'll have like these tiers where you can have like, okay, here's a business bank account, here's a checking account, here's a savings account. And then there are some strings or expectations kind of tied with those financially. There can be sometimes there's not.
balances.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there would be like another tier that's like, okay, if you bump up to this like next tier of business banking account with us, then you get access to, I don't know, bookkeeping options, or you get merchant services and things like that.
Yes. Yeah. Now, because I don't get involved with that too much, as far as I know, I think our minimum balances on the businesses are $5,000.
Okay.
To incur no fees. I could be wrong.
Right.
It changes.
But yes, it does change a lot.
And there is a minimum amount that has to be maintained in the account. Are there monthly or annual fees?
Well, I think that depends on the services that you might need. The next tier up would be like I forget the term.
A number of wire transfers.
Yes,
you would get
exactly. Allowable and
right.
But that's generally
the different tiers of the bank accounts. One, you might get 2 wire transfers at no charge. The other one might a higher tiered one. You might get 6 per month.
Cash management involvement is the term I was looking for.
Okay.
But I can tell you again, given the economy right now, we're requiring that to get a loan from us, you got to open up operating accounts with us, and we want to be a full relationship, right? We don't want to just be the bank that's giving you the debt in order to grow your business, right? But guess what? The balances are going somewhere else. That's not where we want to be.
Right.
That was actually, it's a question I just wrote down and this will go, a lot of this will lean into more of the established businesses, but it's like how something that Troy had said frequently I don't know if he said it to clients, but he said it to me a lot in our conversations about these things. He would say, a bank is not in the business of seeing your business succeed. They're in the business. they are in the business of getting their money back with interest.
Yes.
And so, so we backtrack, I'll just like touch on the importance of that for people to consider from the startup perspective, is that when you're creating your capital requirements and you're doing all of these things and you're working your budget and you're making these projections, like the reason that the projections have to be routed so securely or rooted so securely in a realistic foundation as you can make it is because you need to be able to show a Kendro or any financial institution that there's room in your revenue to cover the monthly cost of that loan with interest at the rate that it's going to be coming in.
Right. Well, most banks, they'll require you to open up a business account, and there'll be an automatic monthly withdrawal for the loan payment.
Yep.
Oh, and there you go. And so that's kind of what you were talking about, that
right.
full relationship.
But in addition to that too, I mean, we're lending, right, money that we're collecting.
Yep.
So if we'll be out of business if we're just lending and we're not collecting in terms of deposits.
Of course.
So So that's why it's important for us that we have. And look, at the end of the day, we want the business to grow, right? We're giving you the debt in order to do so. We're on the hook. You know, if something happens, then guess what? That's a hit.
Right. And that's where
so,
there is, because for me instinctually, and this is an overly simplistic way to look at the world because things are far more complex, but this is the space that I operate out of. And it's that it's in the bank's best interest to make sure that the business succeeds.
Yes.
Because that's the way that you make sure that you get your money back with interest over a long period of time.
Sure. And they want to have the entire relationship, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
You know, right away, a client will say, well, I use another bank. I do all my banking at that bank. Well, did you get the loan from them? Really? You know, so they would like you to move all your funds over to the bank. They're giving you a loan. They're trusting you. They want the entire relationship.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Does it make sense? What are the advantages for like the audience, the people that are looking out there? Is it beneficial to have everything under one roof? That's typically what I recommend as an advisor because it simplifies a lot of it and you don't have to establish additional relationships with additional institutions. But beyond that kind of simplistic view, are there monetary advantages to doing it all under one house? Like, does it one impact the other in any way?
That's a good question, right? I think it really depends on the operations, you know, of the business.
Depends on the type of business.
Yeah. You know, I have a business that, you know, they sell a lot internationally. So it's easier for them to keep accounts with
foreign banks.
Yeah, at a bank. Yeah, exactly. You know, at a larger institution whereas with us, I mean, it would just be, you know, too expensive. So yes, all right, that makes sense.
There are circumstances where they can't move the entire relationship.
Okay.
But you know, most banks want it though.
Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to, from the perspective of somebody that's in business, like, what are the pros and cons? And so that makes sense. You have to understand your business.
So where it comes in a lot too is, so I have, you know, customers that we want to grow the relationship, but we can also see what's coming in as well. So if you need an increase, right, in terms of lending, hey, you know what, I have an opportunity to expand, to do this, to do that. All right, well, updated financials, and we'll take a look to see how you've handled the account.
Right.
You know, so if we see that there's money in there, you know, it makes the approval easier.
that's
You want to make sure that they're using the money correctly. It's like with a line of credit. I'm a firm believer in lines of credit. I think every business should have one. Really, it's especially after COVID. People who didn't have a line of credit during COVID, they really suffered. But you know, with a line of credit, you want to see that it's being used like a line of credit should be used. You use
Not
it,
as
you
a term
replenish
loan?
it. You use it, you replenish it. Otherwise, it becomes a term loan because you max it out and you're just making the minimum monthly payments of interest.
Yeah, and so to like just to draw a picture kind of around what you're talking about. So if I get a line of credit from a financial institution like Dimes, then so let's say what's like an amount, like a reasonable amount for a business, or I guess, I mean, does it range? Do lines of credit amounts just crazy vary from business to business?
Most common is 100,000.
Yeah, on the smaller side, 100,000.
Right.
200,000.
So if I get $100,000 line of credit, what Jeff is saying is if I get that line of credit and then I go and we view it as kind of a business credit card, it's not. Yes. But if we view it as that and we go max it out on like all of this nice, great equipment that we wanted for our pizza shop, we got these new great ovens and all this stuff, and then I'm at like $89,000 spent on my line of credit within the first month, right? That's what you're talking about, right? And so then you're not using it for the working capital expenses, which would include what things?
You might have spent the money on working capital things, but you're finding it hard to pay it all back at this point, you know, and maybe you're waiting to have your busy season to start paying it back. But, you know, the whole point of it is it's revolving like a credit card. So you have to replenish it at times. A lot of banks, I don't know if it's so prevalent right now, but they used to have cleanups.
Yeah.
Where once a year you had to zero out the count for an entire month. So I had clients who freaked out over that at the time, and what they wound up doing, going to another bank, trying to get a line of credit to clean up this line of credit. And I said,
Oh,
oh,
boy.
that's the domino effect.
Peter and Paul.
yeah.
Peter and Paul.
Exactly, but you have to use it the correct way to keep the bank happy. And if you want an increase, that's what they're going to look at, how you treated that line of credit.
So a lot of the things that we talked about for a startup are probably somewhat similar when it comes to an established business and going out and seeking a loan. As far as, I mean, and you had made a really good point about not necessarily needing a capital requirement worksheet as much as being able to just prove that you're able to pay the money back.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I want to take a different approach, a slightly different approach when we're talking about this. And one is I have a question of my own pure curiosity, which is about business credit scores. Okay. But then I want to dive into some things like how can a business with a negative, with like that it's kind of operating in the red, maybe they've been operating in the black for a few years, they're profitable, and then they have a year that goes a little bit south, and then they want to get a loan to kind of change some things like, oh, you know what, we actually need a sales team. We can't just rely on Jimmy over there to like do all these calls or whatever. So I want to get into those type of situations, like when things are going a little bit rough and how to manage that kind of financially with the bank. But first, business credit scores. I know so little about this. It is hilarious. I know that it's a real thing. I know that there's a different like scale in which, but what is it? How is it determined? What's a good score? What's a bad score?
The SBA came out with I can never remember these letters, like a SBRC score or something along those lines, and I believe that's up to like 250,000 or 350 or something along those lines, and it factors all that stuff in: business score, personal credit, industry, financial information, and it kicks out a number. If the actual applicant's number is above that, hey, no problem. If it's below that, the bank needs to justify why we're moving forward with it. So I'll give you an example. One of the recent deals that I did, and I don't remember what that score is, and its system's kind of relatively new. So it was below the number. So I had to justify to the underwriter, okay, well, why are we going to move forward with the score being what it was? And justification was like simply, hey, look, there's enough equity in their home. We're fully collateralized. So if there's any issue that comes up, we should be in a good
right.
good
Yeah, you have that safety net.
So as it relates to the business score, that's kind of where. And now for deals more than that, I'll be honest with you, we really don't look at it all too much.
Really?
Yeah, we're really focused on the historical financials.
There we go.
That's really the determining, and personal credit. The best way I can explain is it's like legs of a table. So we've got personal credit, business financials, collateral, use of proceeds. So there's a whole bunch of C's to credit, right? And depending on what's lacking, all right, well, are the other legs strong enough to support what's, the weak leg here? Right. So that's kind of how we approach lending.
That's it's still such a foreign idea to me, this whole business credit score situation.
It's a different algorithm than a personal credit.
Right. But there's
different factors.
The biggest takeaway for me from this conversation about this particular topic is that it's kind of like it's there, but this isn't the make or break thing.
Yes.
Like
I think,
like a personal credit score.
Yes. So I think, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that why there's such a huge difference, right, is because with the personal credit, everything is being reported, right? You got 3 credit reporting agencies, and I think it's less so on the business,
right?
It's
not weighed as heavily as the personal credit.
Yes,
because there's a lot more factors that can determine the business credit score. Maybe vendors that you're buying from are complaining, things like that.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot more involved.
Holy smokes.
But the personal credit is you.
Yeah.
It's basically it's how you handle your finances.
And it's kind of like it's part of, if you view this, I kind of view I take things that are a little bit abstract to me, and then I tie it to things that like make sense to me, right? So I look at applying for a business loan like a job interview. I have to prove to you that I'm that I'm capable of performing the tasks and functions in this job, and I'm actually a value add.
You're selling yourself and
Exactly.
your business.
And the credit score is just the numerical grading system of that is tallying not like who you are as a person, but your decision-making process when it comes to handling money.
Correct.
And that's why it's so important, even for established businesses when they're going out and seeking additional money. Because if you're not handling money great in your personal life, where's the indication that you're going to be handling it?
Right. And that's the first question I ask clients is when we're talking about lending, I said, what's your personal credit score? I said, and be honest with me because it's going to get checked.
Yes, absolutely.
I promise. No, you're fine. It's one of those things that, I tried my strategy with that after many conversations with you about this very topic is, like I have no say in whether or not the loan comes or not.
Right.
So lying to me isn't going to benefit you in any way. Right. And lying to the bank isn't either because everyone's just going to check and see.
The common answer is, it's good.
Yeah, if I may, I do have an example towards lying or not just being truthful. So
right.
It was a loan that I did many years ago. Gentleman who was a chef professionally, worked at a whole bunch of catering halls, so on and so forth. So he kind of retired from that, and then, he found a new passion in making cakes, right? So we started to do that and, fell in love with it and went to school, got his cake making degree and all that and all that other stuff. So he took his savings, right, and started and wanted to open up his cake business, right? But these aren't the type of cakes that you and I, will go in there, and these are like, $10, $15, $20,000 cakes in, Huntington area where, you've got Crest Hollow, Fox Hollow, you got all those catering halls and so on and so forth. So he took his life savings, put it into the business, right? Revamping a beautiful, to this day, probably one of the nicest retail locations I've ever been in. But it was next to a pawnbroker. It was next to other businesses, small little strip mall that you would think. And I asked him, I said, you got a really nice location, but, if you build it, will they come? And he said yes. So he said that he really doesn't need the location because he's not picking up people off the street. So he's going to be recommended by these caterers, and then they're going to come. Okay, makes sense. I can see the viability in that, right? So throughout the process, I asked him for letters of intent, and he got these letters, recommendation, and all that other stuff. So,
and these are letters of intent from potential like clients, customers of his that are like
potential catering.
Oh, that would bring him.
That
on.
Would yes,
Got
that
it.
would.
Understood.
He was supposed to be part of he would be part of a package.
Got it.
Cool, not a problem. So we did the loan, right? Lo and behold, I don't think he sold one cake. Oh no! So what happened was all that information he made up.
Oh no!
And I'm just like, why would you? Why would you do that?
Unbridled confidence in oneself can be a good thing.
Yeah,
to a certain extent, or you cannot sell a cake.
Yeah, well, all that equipment was liquidated, and the appraiser was just like, "This is." Some of the stuff was still wrapped of the equipment that he bought.
His life savings.
His life savings. So ergo, he had to sell his. I don't know. I think he was in an apartment, but he had to move in with his daughter, and But yeah, it was a tough. Every now and then you come across a deal that just that just gut wrenches you.
That's not fun.
Yeah, but just be honest.
With yourself.
Yes.
Like start with yourself and like, can I afford this? Is this a reasonable plan? Yeah. Like, am I confident in being able? Do I have the actual connections to see this deal? Especially for that in particularly, like how many people do I know right now that would come to me for this
Yeah.
service,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if the answer is not a lot, then that idea of not relying on foot traffic and not worrying about
Yeah,
location
yeah,
as much
yeah.
is, that's rough. And that's a good point. It's a really good business point when it comes to like business and location selection and
Yeah,
stuff. It's a conversation for another time.
Yeah.
It's definitely huge. I mean, we talked about it a bit. We had a real estate, commercial real estate podcast we did a little while ago, and that we talked a lot about location. And the
Gotcha.
importance. It's so
Important.
and then you think about the type of business you have and where it's set amongst the people
Yes.
around you.
You know,
So-
it's true. When I started my business, and I was looking for strip shopping centers, and basically I wanted to have in that strip shopping center other types of businesses where it's a 2-day process, where you drop off, pick up, something
Dry
like
cleaning,
that.
something along those
So
lines.
I wanted to look for dry cleaners, and I also wanted to look for pizza places, okay, because we can cross advertise with each other. And basically, the cleaners was right next to me, and it was a godsend because a lot of times they would come before our store opened up to return the tape, and we weren't open to accept it at that point, but they dropped it off at the cleaners. So the cleaners, you drop off and you pick up the next day. At video, you pick up and drop it off the next day, just the opposite.
And you just
So-
you simplify the trip.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then with the pizza place, what I did was cross advertising. If they bought X amount of dollars worth of pizza, you give them a $5 off coupon for the video store in the same shopping center. And we did that constantly. I would give out coupons for the pizza place
Yeah,
also if they
yeah,
had
yeah.
X amount of rentals. So, you look for certain things in that particular location that can benefit you and these other businesses.
Yep.
And, that's important. But that's all thinking ahead, too.
Yes.
And that's part of doing the homework of starting a business.
Absolutely.
Really.
No, that's great insight. It changes the way that people view kind of relationship management and networking. So a lot of people want to spend the time in their business and they do all of this market research and they figure out like their target audience and what's their value proposition and all of these super important things that really matter a lot. But they don't think about like the kind of outside of the box stuff. Like
Yeah.
that, like establishing relationships with the people that you're physically working next to and the type of hell that can wreak on your business if you get into other businesses that don't operate that way. The owners are like you have a bad relationship with them, and how that can impact things. And if they don't run a great business and you're next to it, then it's rough. It's rough. So when we go and we're thinking about an established business, right? And they're seeking, and they're in that, let's take on that scenario I kind of alluded to earlier. So we have a business that has, let's say they've been open for 5 years. 4 of the years they have been, let's say they built up first 2 years, like increased revenue. Third year, fourth year, they kind of stabilize. And then the 5th year, they fall off and they're actually, their tax returns reflect that they're negative.
Okay.
And now they want to reinvest into their business because they see that some of the problems that are occurring. What do you want to see from this business?
So in that scenario, along with startups, we're going to need, because there's negative cash flow in the year, we're going to need projections.
Okay.
Right. So we're going to need projections. We're going to need assumptions. So it's just like, okay, well, you've been doing good. You hit a bump in the road. Well, what's that bump? Why did you hit the bump in the road? Right.
So you have
What's
to
your-
understand the problem
Yes,
first.
absolutely. And also want to know how you're going to go forward. Like what was it? Somebody else I was financing, and there was a contract, like they had a business where they dealt with contracts and they lost a major contract, that year. But you know what? They realized it, and going forward, they're going to look to bring on more salespeople and start working on smaller contracts. So if they lose one, it's not going to be that much of a detriment to business operations. So, it's things like that you got to ask, and you got to get your hands behind.
Yeah, you want to know their clients, what percentage of your business is with this client. Now, you could have a client that's been supporting your business for 10 years, and all of a sudden you lose them, and they supplied 50% of your business. You're going to take a major nosedive at that point. So, you want to be diversified with your clients as much as possible.
Such a good point. That's one of the things that I talk to people when they're in that very, very, very early stage, when they're considering entrepreneurship or business ownership, is I have that exact conversation.
Right.
And it's, okay, no matter what, you know, you're going to be working for somebody else. Like when you own your own business, it's what you're doing is you're shifting. If you shift from a 9 to 5 to working at a 9 to 5 to creating a 9 to 5 or whatever for other people, you're just trading the number of people that you work for. And so, but it's interesting the propensity, and maybe it's because we've had this built into us from working for other people, is for when you get into business, and if you're dealing with that kind of thing, when you're working with clients versus customers, kind of different thing. And so you have there's a propensity to go to like, oh, I have this one client, and it makes it simple because then I just deal with this person. But when they're bringing in 90% of your company's revenue, it's the question comes back up like, are you an entrepreneur? Like, are you a business owner, or do you just work for this person?
That's a red flag.
Yeah.
Big time.
When it comes to like their finances, or what do you mean?
Even applying for a loan.
Right.
Yeah, when it comes to finances, sure.
You're too dependent on one client for this business to be successful.
Wow. So that's important, the diversification and spreading that wealth out. I know when I was working for that sales company that was based out of Britain, out of London specifically, they'd always talked about the long tail of sales, like, and of business relationships and adding more clients. They're like, do we want the big ones? Yeah, buddy, we want the big ones. But we also want our tail to be super long, chocked full of all these mid-size, little size, because we don't want exactly that thing. Like all it takes is turn around, like, we're in a contract with them for 3 years. 3 years rolls over, and it's like, if they don't renew, what happens to us? Okay, we just lost 2 salesmen because now we don't have the revenue to keep this department up.
And also with small businesses, and I'm not exaggerating when I say small businesses, okay? You always have to look, I asked the client, because when I had my business, I was always looking for other sources of revenue for the business. That's how I'm going to grow this business. You know, I can't count on growing the business by getting more members, really, because there's just X amount of videos I can keep in the store. Right? So I was always looking for alternate sources of revenue. And right away, I applied for a Ticketmaster machine to be a Ticketmaster agent, and I got it, and that helped tremendously. I didn't make a lot of money from Ticketmaster itself, but I got new customers because of it. All right.
Well, I'm there.
Exactly. Exactly. And also, somebody came in and said, well, how about I put in pinball machines in your store? And at first I said, nah, I don't think I'll need that. Sure enough, he puts in 3 pinball machines, and those machines are racking up.
Oh, really?
I mean, the people loved it. I never played pinball much, but these people were great. It was like, my God, the pinball wizards. They came out of the woodwork. And I kept telling them, all right, every month I want different machines because my customers are getting tired of the same ones.
Same ones, gotcha.
Exactly,
gotcha.
right?
Look at this.
And then I said,
Jeff's a
all
killer.
right, so you're coming in to rent the video. I want a rack with potato chips and popcorn and stuff like that,
snacks.
so you can buy that. I actually, I bought a popcorn machine, one of the big kettle machines, and I didn't get it to make money. They said the smell's going to be intoxicating when they walk in. And what a difference that made. Really. People loved it. As soon as they walked in, and I was giving it away for free.
Gotcha.
You know, you rent 2 movies, you get a bag of popcorn. And it just keeps them coming back. Because you have to have an edge over your competition because they're so they're nearby and they're selling the same product you are. So, you know, you have to think out of the box once you get the business going, too.
It's so funny that you brought that up. That's a recommendation I make to people that are in the farmer's market stage, if they're doing like food products or like making their shirts or whatever. Is I'm like, is there something that you can do that produces what's the word? A desirable smell, like an aroma that people want to smell. Like, so some people want to start their own coffee companies. Some people want to make their own bread and stuff like that and sell it. And I'm like, you don't show up to the farmer's market with it pre-made. Like, obviously have your product ready to sell, but show up with your bread maker. Make that bread. Show up with 5 bread makers and just be pumping it out. Make sure that it's in the stage of whatever when it's the most aromatic, right? And to get people's, because we're sensory, you know.
Well, it's like when you sell a house, they say bake a cake or bake a pie.
Right?
Oh my God.
Just for the smell in the place.
That's right.
Really?
I forgot about that. That's so funny. I want to revert back to a breakdown and this goes for both of you absolutely, but we'll start with Kendro. When it comes to understanding the difference of the purposes, we kind of already covered the LOC, the lines of credit. But what is the difference and what is the reason that both of these exist? What between the SBA loan and a conventional loan?
Yeah, right. So, at the heart of it, right, the U.S. economy is based on small businesses, and it's a risky. They are risky. So, on a conventional side, banks are, because there's more risk that's inherited, banks aren't going to generally lend to them. Ergo, that's why we have SBA financing, and the government gives anywhere from 50 to 90% guarantee.
And
so,
so just to break down in super layman's terms.
Yeah.
So how and what impact does that have, and how does that impact the lending situation?
Sure. So if I use request A, right, there's really only one request. Sorry. We're looking at, right, startup, or doesn't necessarily need to be startup. Maybe lack of collateral.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
Maybe historical cash flow isn't there.
Okay.
Maybe experience isn't there, right? So on the conventional side, no bank's touching them. On an SBA side, because of the government guarantee, the bank would be more not averse, but would be more apt to lend them the financing that they need.
Is that the typical kind of process? Is everyone's going to start observe through the lens of conventional?
No.
And then if you don't make that, then you go SBA?
Well, I mean, typically, yes, depending on if it's startup, right, then you're going SBA.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know any bank that's really financing startups on a conventional side.
Understood. Okay.
So let's say your example before, where you're in operations for 5 years, right? 4 years, you're, kicking butt. The 5th year, you took a hit.
Right.
On the conventional side, yeah, they're going to look at it, but the likelihood is they're probably going to filter you down to SBA.
Wow. Okay.
Because of that, right? They want to see historical cash flow, and their debt service requirements are generally about 1.25 historically, whereas on SBA
So
side,
what does that break that down? What does that mean?
So for every dollar of debt that you have, you've got to be making $1.25
Right.
to cover.
That's what the
That's
bank is
what they-
expecting to see
Yes.
in your revenue that you're bringing in.
Historically.
Okay. Historically.
Yes,
Like from the
and
past.
currently, yes,
Got it.
exactly.
Okay.
Right.
But
They'll-
what's
So that
important
you
is-
want that cash flow statement that brings you, or the budget that's like year to date,
They'll want
Yes.
3 years to compare
3
Yes,
years backwards,
exactly.
and then
Yep.
what's going on
and
right now.
current.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then in that, so yeah, for every dollar, then you need to be making that you're requesting.
Yes.
You need to be making 125.
1.25
Yes.
of
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Now, whereas SBA comes in, debt service we're looking at a 1.15, but we can do things on a projected basis.
Got it.
So even though, again, your example, 4 years, you're at a 1.15, but the 5th year, you're at a, 0.5 or something along those lines, with projections and assumptions and an understanding as to how you got in that situation, how you're going to get out of that situation, we'll be able to move forward. Whereas conventionally,
It's cut and
you're-
dry.
So
yes.
okay,
Yeah.
so I want to get real kind of tactical or tangible here. So in this situation, let's say it's me, it's my business,
Yes.
right? And 4 years rocking, 5th year red, right? And what are you actually expect? Like, do you want my business plan? And
Well,
do you want, like, how are you expecting this as far as like kind of a package that I'm delivering?
Sure. So, we would look for 3 years personal tax returns, 3 years corporate tax returns, personal financial statement for the principals, anybody, 20% or more.
And so what is
And-
included in a personal financial statement?
So, in essence, it's going to be the assets, your personal assets,
Okay.
your personal liabilities, and that's really it.
It's a personal balance sheet.
Yes,
Got it.
personal balance.
Right.
Okay.
And it
Cars,
gauges,
houses,
Yes.
right,
boats,
it gauges
whatever.
your net
Yeah.
worth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and so that's the purpose of that document is
Yep.
to reflect your net worth.
Yes.
Yeah,
Ish.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Okay.
also when we look at it, it tells us, all right, again, right, from an SBA's perspective, if there's not enough assets in the business, we're going to take your house. So that tells us, all right, what
do you have that we can
what do
take?
you have that? Yes. Yes,
not
pretty much.
not what do you have that we can take?
Yeah.
But what do
Yeah.
you have that's going to cover this if things go
Yes,
south?
exactly.
If you're the cake maker.
Yes, yes, exactly.
And the last
Exactly.
thing the bank wants is to take your house.
Yes.
Really.
It seems like it's more complicated and more difficult
It
for you
is,
guys to manage
yes.
than if the loan just works out.
Correct.
So it's there as a safety net, but it's not even preferred for you guys.
Yeah, it's not. It's really
They
not.
won't get the value of the house.
Yeah, but not only that, but how often do you want to, read on Newsday, bank kicks out a, family of 4.
100%.
It's just not.
That's
Yeah.
why it's so hard to get loans for churches and synagogues.
Yes, yep.
The
that's
last thing you want to read in the
reputational risk.
paper is, oh,
Wow.
this bank put this synagogue or church out of business.
Yes, yeah.
Sorry, fellas.
Yeah.
Guess you didn't pray enough.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Oh my God. So okay.
What I wanted to ask you, with the 7A loans,
Mhm.
let's say it's a startup, the projections are really good, the business plan's very good, but they want the funds for various things. Now, I know with the 7A, it covers a lot of things like
Yes.
equipment purchases,
Mhm.
working capital.
Mhm.
Now, did they become separate loans? Because
No. So what it is, it becomes a multiple disbursement loan.
Okay.
So let's say, for example, real life example, right? Startup
Sorry if
I'm
I'm off
looking
off the track here.
No, this is perfect.
Startup funded $200,000. Okay, let's just say it's a franchise. All right, they need to get leasehold improvements done. So out of the 200,000, 50 is for leasehold improvements, 50 is for working capital, 50 is for equipment, and 50 is for inventory. Right. So day one, we close. Right, they're approved. They close on a $200,000 loan. But let's say, for example, they need to start hiring people, training. So out of that $50,000 for working capital, maybe we'll fund them $25,000 day one to kind of help keep things, to kind of like that match per se, right? We'll pay the vendors for the leasehold improvements directly, right? So, or we can cut them out a check, but we, like to just kind of pay for them, directly. So they'll get the work started. So there'll be an initial deposit. We'll do that. Then they'll get the work going as the project continues. We'll fund them, directly. So now they've hired people. They're going through training. The store is retrofitted to the franchise specifications. So now they got to get the equipment in. So we'll fund the equipment vendors directly. Now, if there's lead time, if there's 3 months lead time, something along those lines, we can fund that at closing, so it really kind of depends. So now, okay, right, we got the operations or the people are hired, they're going through training, leasehold's done, the equipment's done, and then there's a remaining balance of about $25,000 for the rest of the leaseholds, for the rest of the working capital. So when they're ready to go, we'll fund them the balance. We get the
So now
CVO,
they'll have
they're
a
ready to go.
specific working capital line of credit.
Well, no, not a line of credit. It's just a term loan,
Okay.
right? So
Baked
it's
into
just
the 200,000.
yeah, but it's just like you divvy up like a pizza pie, right? So you're gonna get 2 slices at closing. You get this done. When it's time for this, you'll get another 2 slices, another 2 slices, and another 2 slices. Now, one thing we were talking about lines of credits before. The SBA Express line of credit, it works differently than a conventional line of credit.
Okay.
Now, the difference is the term is up to 10 years.
Okay.
All right. The first 5 years, it's a revolver.
Okay.
The other 5 years, whatever the balance is, gets turned into a
out.
5-year term loan.
Right.
So on that one, there's no cleanup requirement.
Okay.
So on that type of loan, right, you can take it all day one. You pay back into it. It becomes available for you to draw upon it. So it's totally different. But here's the caveat, right? We tend not to. We don't give that option to startup businesses, really. We have, but there's got to be some strong parameters. And the reason why, it's the guarantee. There's only a 50% guarantee on that. So
By the SBA.
Through the SBA.
So the bank
So
has
the bank's exposure is more.
exactly.
So if you're an established business, and we've done that. I've done a type of business, a furniture business, right? And did a 504. He bought the building, saved a ton of money on rent. Now he's getting into government contracts. So IRS buildings, things of that nature. He's outfitting, right? So he expanded to more than just furniture. He's doing painting, he's doing carpet, all that other stuff.
Wow.
So I had provided him a $500,000 express line of credit to support that, the growth of that.
500,000?
500,000, yeah.
Wow.
Express goes that high?
Yeah. I think it's between COVID, I think at most or initially was 250, either 250 or 350. Then COVID hit, and I think it went up to $1 million.
Wow.
Then they brought it back to $500,000, and I think that's where it is.
So the express line of credit is that 10-year, first 5 years revolving,
Correct.
next 5 years
Yeah,
terms
max term. I mean, they can do 3 and 3, something along those lines, but the max it goes out to is a full 10 years.
So I guess it's a great segue into like what are the different. So that's one tool or asset or resource through the SBA. What are the different like financing options?
So really, you've got two. You've got the SBA 504, which is primarily for the purchase of real estate.
Okay.
Right.
Commercial building.
Commercial
Okay.
building.
Okay.
Yeah. Now you can what I guess recently you can use that 504 to refinance a 7A if it was purchased, if the use of proceeds were used to purchase or make improvement to real estate or equipment.
Okay. So if you got a 7A, which is more generalized.
So the 7A typically, right, the major difference is because everything with the 504, like everything you can do with 504, you can do with 7A.
Okay.
But generally the 7A carries a variable rate.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Whereas the 504 is a fixed rate.
Right.
Understood.
And you have two mortgages.
Yes.
50% is the mortgage from the bank, 40% is the mortgage from the SBA, and 10% is your down payment.
And so your expectations
or
of somebody's
equity that's already in the property.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, so that could work instead of
That
the 10%.
would be your
So you get
Okay.
two actual mortgage statements because you're making two separate payments.
Yeah.
And they go to two different locations because it's not the same person.
Right.
It's not the same.
But the
business.
bank likes it because they're only on the hook for 50%
Right. Yeah, because
of
it's
the
covered.
original amount.
And so then there's not anything that needs to happen on the backside if something goes south. It's where the SBA is like giving the bank money. It's like, no, it's divvied from the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct.
That's
So from our perspective, yes, it's an SBA 504 program, but from the bank's perspective, it's really a conventional loan.
Right.
okay.
Their mortgage is
Oh,
conventional.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then the rate, a big difference too, is not generally, but the rate is lower on the SBA side.
Yep.
Okay.
And it's fixed for the life of the loan.
It's a great product. I did many of them when I was in bank. I love the
Really?
504.
Yeah.
You wanted real estate? We're going 504.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And so, but but there's limitations. You said it's typically used for real estate.
Strictly. Buying commercial buildings.
Yeah, buildings or equipment. You can add on leasehold improvements. So,
But if you got a 7A
And you occupy 51%.
yes, that's a
Owner-occupied.
huge thing. It's got to be owner occupied. Yeah.
Okay. And so just go into that. I know that you were about to say something, but
Yeah,
just break
sorry.
down
Yeah, go
what
ahead.
that means, owner occupied, for those listening.
So in terms of square footage, I mean, you got to occupy 51%, and that can include common areas. That can also include outdoor space as well. So,
So
I
this
have
is
a,
relevant
basements.
to
yes
people that are
So-
leasing in like a strip mall or
yes,
or that. Yeah.
yes, it wouldn't apply.
Okay.
So I'll give you. So if you're in Brooklyn, right, and you've got multifamily, let's just say you've got 3 stories,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and there's no basement, right, or even if the basement is smaller than the perimeter of the structure,
Okay.
right, as long as if it doesn't, so let's just say if it's 50-50,
Mm-hmm.
right, then it does not qualify for SBA financing.
So if I owned a business,
business.
there's say there's 4 floors exactly the same.
Yep.
I own 2,
Yep.
and another person owns 2. Then I can't get.
Well, at that point, it's 50. Now you got the next question would be, well, what are the so there's hallways, right? So is there a hallway on on level 3 or 4.
Okay.
If there's a utility closet,
That
either of
expands
those,
the space.
then that
Right.
you'll get.
It gets to that level of
Yes.
detail.
Oh, it's based on
Yes.
square footage.
Yes.
Holy. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's
Yeah.
in the building, and this is a building that you would be buying if it's
Yes, correct.
no lease or anything, or
Or you own or acquired it via a SBA 7A loan.
okay.
Yeah.
And so you can use a 7A to purchase commercial real estate,
Yes,
but then
you
you're
can.
but then you're
And-
operating from a fixed interest rate perspective.
Well, the 7A is a
7A
variable.
is variable.
Variable,
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
not not fixed.
So
I meant variable.
I'll give you.
But you can refinance the 7A with a 504.
with a 5A.
Yes,
That's what you were
yes,
saying.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
So I'll give you an example on how we would probably look at it, right? So if we're looking at a business acquisition that came with the real estate, right, and the financials are kind of borderline, we would probably say, hey, look, right, we'll do this. Let's try and do this as an SBA 7A, right, with the idea of refinancing it as a 504 within about 2 years.
Okay.
You know, because in this way, major reason is our guarantee is 75% if we did it as a 50 as a 7A,
Okay.
as opposed to, so it's just, hey, look, it's borderline. Let's get you this product first. See how operations, see how you're able to manage the business and operations,
it.
and then down the line, after a couple of years of profitable years, we'll refinance you out with a 504.
So how would the 504,
Mm-hmm.
correct me if I'm wrong, is that's where it's 50-40-10 as far as
Yes,
responsibility.
correct.
Right.
And so when you make that transition from 75-25 or 75-15-10, is that what a 7A would be?
No, 7A, we can fund, I mean, it's a startup, so we'll need 10%. Yeah. So it would be 10% of equity contribution. So under the 7A, we can fund 90%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if it's an existing business,
Mm-hmm.
we can actually do 100%
Oh, okay.
of the financing under the 7A.
The SBA?
The SBA can.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Get 100% that's backed by the SBA.
Yeah.
And
Well, the business is providing the equity.
right. And so it all comes with the property then. It's like, would that be how that?
Yeah, so in
I guess
essence, it would
could
be the
work?
same as if you were an existing business and you were buying equipment, right? Or
Mhm.
you were investing or you were expanding your business. There's no equity requirement there.
Because we're just going to take it back. Like, if it goes south, the bank will just take the equipment back.
Yeah,
Kind of a
yeah,
thing,
but
something like
we're
that.
not getting, yeah.
Not in the not necessarily in the repo business,
Yes,
but
exactly.
but
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Right. The last thing
But
you-
that's just as far as that's how like the collateral kind of works. It's built into the purchase because you're buying something that's tangible.
Yes, so in something like that, if we are buying equipment, right, if it's not new equipment, if it's used equipment, right, if it's coming with the business, then there has to be evaluation
That
done
makes
on that.
sense.
There's got to be evaluation done on the business as well.
That makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, no,
I did a 504 where it was a strip shopping center. It was 4 stores, but 2 of the stores was the owner of the shopping center, and with the square footage, even though that's on the surface 50%, but square footage wise, it was more than 50%. The 2 stores that he had.
and so that's where that comes into place when you own the entire structure and other people are you're
Yes.
inviting other businesses to come in.
Right.
You have to own and you have to occupy 51%
Yes,
of the
correct.
square footage
Yep.
of that.
Yep.
But do you include the rental revenue from the other 2? Most of the time, you don't.
No.
You want to see
it's
cash
not
flow
an
without that.
SBA, right? SBA
Right.
doesn't require, because if the SBA is looking at rental income, then it becomes an
Investment property.
Exactly.
Right.
So, but we do kind of make a note. It is represented in our write-ups that, you
Right.
know what, hey,
There is additional.
this is what it is,
revenue.
but there is additional income coming in.
Okay. I'm glad that you used the example a little bit ago with that $200,000 for the franchise because I wanted to ask just a few quick questions about franchising.
Sure.
How does that play in? Do you see it as a different category from like established versus startup?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, it's a safer bet somewhat of a safer bet than just
Safer startup bet.
yeah. Yes, exactly.
It is.
Exactly.
We're coming up with
Yeah.
new terms here.
Yeah.
SSBs. We got
Yes, exactly.
It's statistically
So-
and historically, it is safer because that's why I went with a franchise.
And why is
Franchises have a 70% success rate. If I was to open Jeff's video store, there's only a 30% success rate.
that? Sarah, can you actually, can you hop on the mic if you wouldn't mind? And and share. I did just a quick blurb research. It was from an article written on Inc.com, and she's got just some percentages of businesses.
Yes. So this says, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, 20% of startups fail in 2 years, 45% fail in 5, and 65% fail in 10. And this excludes the quick failures that go under before a statistic is even registered.
Hello. Would you mind doing a little bit of research to see if we can find similar percentages for a franchise?
Sure.
Thank you so much. Because I'm guessing, just like you were saying, talking about the success rate of franchises, it's going to be astronomically different.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the reason why a bank would look at this differently. And so what is it? What are you getting coming from a former franchise owner? What are you getting that actually that makes it different than you just making Jeff's video store?
Right. Well, the reason why basically they feel it's more successful, even though I'm considered a startup because I didn't even open the store yet
Right.
at that time, but they have other stores to use as history. And with their projections are similar size stores or whatever. So, there's an advantage with that. Now, when you're purchasing a franchise, you look at two things right away. What's the franchise fee? Okay, now that's a cash fee that you pay that you don't get back. Okay, and what's the royalty percentage, your monthly royalty? Now, when I bought the franchise, my franchise fee was $50,000. That was in the ballpark with other types of similar types of franchises. Okay. Now, then I wanted them to clarify, what do I get for the $50,000? So they give me training, they give me people to come do the layout of the place, right? They'll even recommend the people to do the construction, the build out for you.
And this is all coming from an organization that has done this
Right.
Yeah.
time after time and after time and has a
Right.
system for success.
And the training was tremendous. It really was. The royalty was at that time, rule of thumb, you wanted to keep it in single digits. So mine was 7%, so it fell into that category, and that was pretty good.
Heck yeah. And you look at where my kind of specialty comes in and like the marketing and the brand,
Right.
like that's, you
Right.
got it. You're on somebody else's name. Like you don't have to build yourself up
Yes.
from
Right.
nothing.
Yes.
You know,
Name
getting
recognition.
a
Right.
Blockbuster or getting a video store, is different than Jeff's because like, who's Jeff?
Yeah.
Right.
Never heard of him.
Yeah.
That's what I hear from my wife. But, basically, I want to see how much advertising you're going to give me, especially since you're first starting to have franchises in Long Island.
Sure.
Because they were based basically in Philadelphia and New Jersey. I was the third West Coast video in Long Island. So I
West
had-
Coast
West
Video.
Coast-
I love it.
So I-
Based out of West Coast Video, based
On
out
the
of
East-
Philadelphia,
well,
located in Long Island.
they came with that name because they want to have the Hollywood connection.
Yeah. Yep.
But Hollywood Video was already taken.
Gotcha.
Those were the two. I remember growing up. We had the Blockbuster and we had a Hollywood Video right next door, and I was full on brewing Kool-Aid for Blockbuster.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know who these Hollywood
Yeah.
folks are.
That-
I'm in Omaha, Nebraska.
was-
I'm like,
that-
but we don't like them here.
That was my nemesis, Blockbuster.
Really?
Because when I was looking to buy the franchise, Blockbuster was franchising at that time also, but West Coast Video was number one.
Okay.
In size, Blockbuster was number two. Then Blockbuster went the other way. They stopped doing franchising, strictly corporate stores, where West Coast Video had very few corporate stores and was, I'd say, 90% franchising.
Blockbuster sealed their own coffin, though.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, but
they lived high on the horse for a little while.
but you want to see what you can get from it. I was disappointed with the lack of advertising on Long Island, and I felt abandoned. That I opened up here and I wasn't seeing the advertising, so I wanted to get out of my my franchise agreement, which I did.
Okay.
I had to buy my way out, but I figured, what was the point if you're not advertising on radio and newspapers where you are in Philadelphia and New Jersey? people don't know who we are.
Yeah, no, you have to get it out there. Sarah, I think, has come up with some news, some info.
Yes. So it's relatively the same. It changes obviously depending on where you're looking. But it seems as though out of this one, it says Bates looked at more than 20,500 small businesses and found that 65.3% of franchises survived after 4 years, compared to 72% of independent businesses. Retail franchises had a lower survival rate of 61.3% compared to the 73.1% of independent retail locations. But that kind of makes sense, I think. And then, there's different ones that say 20% of independent businesses close after 2 years. And franchise consulting firm reports that 92% of franchises were still going strong after 2 years.
That's interesting. That is not necessarily the numbers. So correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe I just misheard this. At 4 years, are there independent businesses are more likely to survive than a franchise?
In retail franchises.
In retail franchises.
Yeah, which makes sense because a bigger retail, like independent owned businesses with retail, it's like really hard to get going because you have to figure out like wholesale prices and it's just a lot more involved when somebody's already taking care of it.
Yep. Yep. Well, there you go. So yeah, there's definitely huge advantages when it comes to starting a franchise. So when you see somebody come in your door, what are you looking at? I know that we spoke on professional experience or just experience earlier. I'm imagining with this being startup adjacent, if you will, like a franchise, that you would be wanting, it would be advantageous for somebody to come in with some sort of experience, or what are you looking at?
So, I mean, if it's a franchise, I would really kind of want to get a better understanding of what training's involved if they're coming in without experience.
Got it.
Right.
It's kind of Jeff was saying what he took it upon himself to, work for somebody for free and get that. It's, what's the requirement from the franchise? Are they requiring that you work in the store, somewhere to try and get that hands-on direct experience? And so that helps, that definitely helps. There are a couple franchises that, we do kind of fund with regard to expansion. And one thing that Jeff also mentioned with regard to the franchise fee, that can be included in their equity requirement. So they don't have to come out of pocket the franchise fee and 10% on top of that. Wow. So depending on what that is, we would consider that, an investment in the business, right. Which would be the equity.
And so is it the same? Then is it the similar kind of things that you're looking at then in order to lend that person who wants to start that franchise? You're going to be looking at their credit score.
Yes. Yeah.
You're going to be looking at their
same criteria.
Yeah. And they're going to, at times, the franchise helps them, with the projections and the assumptions.
Actually, I've received full business plans for franchises in that location.
I told them for $50,000, I want a business plan and I want projections.
Right.
And they supplied them. And I thought their training was terrific. I really did. Their support was very good, just with the exception of the advertising part, which I think they decided not to go forward anymore with Long Island. Gotcha. But other than that, I was happy with them. I really was. Right. The name recognition wasn't as great as I thought it would be, only because they didn't open up more on Long Island.
Yeah.
Right.
And after I got out of my franchise agreement, they wanted me to change the name.
Gotcha.
So right
that
away,
makes sense.
So we were
because you're not us anymore.
Now I had a really beautiful overhead sign, right? It was so nice. It really was. But the whole first panel was West Coast Video. Okay. So we were going to change it to East Coast Video.
We're keeping the sign.
And then
we're not doing a complete overhaul.
And then I said to my wife, you know what? I'm not even changing it.
Did you just keep it? That's
and
hilarious.
Nothing ever happened. They didn't check or anything like that.
Yeah, they really did pull out of Long Island.
I want to revisit because you asked me a question and I gave you the wrong information. The 4 years, it said 65.3% of franchises survived after 4 years compared to the 72% of independent businesses.
Right.
Right.
And so it's saying 72% of independent businesses survived after 4 years? That feels contradictory to
It does.
the stat that we pulled that we listed out at first.
And found that 65.3% of franchises survived after 4 years.
And so what did the Inc. article say after 4 years? I think they broke it down.
And then, and then the Bureau, 20% of independent businesses close after 2 years. In contrast, franchise consulting firm Fran.net reports that 92% of franchisees were still going strong after 2.
So the 2-year mark is a really big differentiator. At 4 years, they're almost equal.
Right.
Right, a few percentage points off. But at 2, if you want to make it through that first threshold into the beginning,
Got to
and
make it through
especially
that,
if you want
the 2-year muddiness.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes sense because those are going to be really rough years when it comes to organizing and getting your employees and getting the marketing. You have so many different plates that are spinning.
And you're learning so much.
Exactly.
At the same
But then
time.
it's like, are you?
Yeah.
Are you actually learning? Because there's so much going on.
Well,
like, what are you learning? And are you learning
You're
the
learning
right
that you
things
didn't
at the
cover
right time?
everything from the beginning.
No, all of the things that you didn't plan for. And so a franchise is a really good way to kind of bridge that gap. And especially if you're not seeing yourself as like, I'm not going to be a lifetime Chick-fil-A owner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Maybe I just want to do this for the next 7 years and I want to get it fully paid off. Everything's done. And now I have this type of experience because what I really want to do is open my own restaurant. But I want to get that experience under me.
Yeah,
And then I can
yeah.
take that again to a lender and say, I have that direct
Yeah,
experience.
yeah.
And not only just to prove it to you, but to genuinely know and to do that training. Again, master's degree. That's like PhD level.
Yeah,
If you're going to go
yeah.
do a franchise and then convert later, that's you're in it.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and so you understand.
Now, with the SBA, do they require franchises to be brick and mortar?
No.
Because
And that's a good question when it comes to the
yeah.
requirements. So
Right,
can you talk?
Because when I was at Bank of America, they had an SBA division that just handled the SBA
Okay.
loans. We handed it off to them, but you still got credit for it. But
Yeah,
There you go.
but yeah, exactly. But it had to be brick and mortar.
Okay.
Because I had 2 clients that one owned a Pepperidge Farm route,
Oh, okay.
and the other one owned a Snap-on route. Now
And you couldn't do them?
they wouldn't do it
Wow.
because they didn't consider a truck's brick and mortar,
Wow.
and they were so. And I was
now one thing, Jeff, that a lot of people might not necessarily realize so when you're applying through an SBA loan, there's generally 2 hoops you got to go through, right? You got to be SBA eligible, and you also have to be quote unquote bank eligible as well. So maybe that bank, it was their requirement.
Oh yes,
Yes. So
No, I
it was
agree.
so it was still so they could have went to another bank
absolutely.
and have gotten the SBA financing.
And I recommended that.
Yeah. Okay.
You want money, you're
Yes,
just not going to get
gotcha.
it here.
I said,
Yes,
I'll make
yes.
some phone calls for you.
Yes.
And that's great. That's something
Yeah.
that you wouldn't necessarily anticipate. And you actually started out our conversation here with talking, like recommending people to research other
Yeah.
financial
Yep.
institutions for things that maybe you're not strong
Yeah.
on.
Yep.
You know, basically, and I'm sure Kendro's the same way. I always looked at being a relationship manager as it's my own consulting firm.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to try and help my client no matter what. If I can't help them with the bank that I'm currently working for, then I'm going to recommend another bank. I know enough people in other banks to let them take a shot at it.
Brilliant.
And to me, the whole objective was to satisfy the customer,
Yes.
help them out in their business. And that's why I never thought of it as a sales job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
You know, I looked at it, I'm running it like it's my own business.
Yeah, like a consulting firm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that really, is there anything else about franchises, about lending, that things that people need to consider? I know that there was changes at the SBA when it comes to, they had a list.
Yes, they had a list. So they had like a franchise approved list. So there was a website you would go to, you type in the name of the franchise, and then it'll tell you if it was approved. Subsequently, they've done away with that. So that's no longer there.
Okay.
You know.
Now, do you think it expanded getting SBA loans for
So I'm so
franchises?
great that you mentioned that, because SBA right now is they're trying to make it easier for businesses to get capital.
That's
So yes, right, to answer your question, right? So there was an SBA guarantee fee. There still is, right? But before it was, the amounts in which those fees came into came to fruition, or the levels in which you needed to pay has been kind of varying, but right now we're at $1 million. So any loans $1 million or less, or $999,000 or less, there's no SBA guarantee fee. Whereas before, if we were having this conversation, I believe it was $350. Anything above that, there was it, and it's anywhere from like 2.5% to like 3.5% of the loan amount. So it's it's not the end of the world, but it's sizable.
Yes.
Exactly.
So they've made changes more recently with the SOP, and it's constantly a moving target. But like now we can do partial business acquisitions, where before it was either you're buying the entire business, or you're not. At the end of the day, it had to be 100%, ownership. Now you can go in and buy 80%, 70%.
Oh wow!
So you can do that.
Getting a little tangential, is what is required to become a franchise?
So I have a friend of mine who just recently got their business to be a franchise.
So they converted from a regular.
So you need to have a certain amount of stores.
Right.
Okay.
Right. You need to have, and they have to be at different. I don't know what the radius is, but different locations. I believe there's got to be a level of profitability.
Okay.
But in essence, I want to say it took him maybe about 3 or 4 years to actually. So it's got to be kind of proven.
Okay.
And then he was at Jacob Javits Center a couple months ago. They had like a franchise. They do like a franchise show.
Mm-hmm.
And he had just got approved, or they had just got approved, in order
That's
to
exciting.
do it. So, but I know it took some time,
Sure.
But in terms of the specifics, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I know it's got to be a what they would.
But it
deem
is
a
an
proven
actual
concept.
classification. Like
Correct.
Your business
Yes,
does
it
get
is.
changed. That's really interesting.
Yes, it is a classification.
You don't
yeah.
just choose all right, I'm gonna start selling stores.
No.
Here's a
No,
business plan.
Yep.
Kendro, you had brought up the idea of the rules, the SOP changing for business acquisition. So it went was that SOP or was that Dime?
No, SOP.
SOP.
Yeah.
And so now, so you can get an SBA loan. Is this what that means? You get an SBA loan for purchasing a percentage of a business. Does it have to be a certain percentage, or can it be less than 50? Or
so anything that's 20% or more, right?
Okay.
You need to have a personal guarantee.
Okay.
Right. So I'm not sure on what the percentages are.
Sure.
It's kind of one of those things that they made these changes, but I haven't worked any deals through them yet.
Yeah, it's still
but
that fresh. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay.
So it's to my understanding, and so they came out with it over the summer, and then it was just so confusing, and then they came out with more verbiage on trying to make it clear.
Would that apply for, let's say, accounting firms and law firms, where if you're made a partner, you have to buy into the equity of becoming a partner? There's two types of partners.
Yeah.
There's a partner where you're just a partner in name.
Yeah.
And then there's a partner where you're an equity sharing partner,
Yes.
revenue sharing partner. Now, in that particular case, you have to come up with quite a bit of money
Right.
in order to buy into
It's
that
to
partnership.
my understanding that yes, it will
They
be
will.
applicable in those situations.
Oh, so you could get, so if you're a lawyer and you made partner at your firm, then
Equity
you could,
Or
partner.
you were offered that.
Yeah.
right, if you're offered that,
Yeah.
then you could go and get a loan to cover the costs to
Yes.
be able.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, do you have to incorporate in order to do that?
Do you need it? Yeah.
Well, the thing about that though too, let me see. Now that I think about it. So can it be done? Yes. Now that I think about it, it's to my understanding that no, it wouldn't be a separate incorporation. So that law firm in actuality, or that accounting, would have to guarantee the loan. So
And that's not going to happen.
and that's
Let's
so
be real.
so those are kind of the nuances that
Yeah.
it's like, hey, it looks great, but in all
Yeah.
actuality, is it
So
it
this
a
is
viable
this
option?
is more along the lines of I want to start Matt's video store.
Okay.
And I see Jeff's video. Jeff is I mean, let's take out the whole franchise component to this. And Jeff's video store is there, and he's like, "I'm cool. I'm ready to retire. I just want to hit the golf course, and call my life good." And I'm like, "I want to buy your business."
Yeah.
So if I'm doing that, what are some of the key things that I need to be looking out for, or keeping my eye on? Because I'm going to be coming to your doorstep, and so how do I plan for that effectively? Like, what's my steps?
Yeah, I mean,
It's like when they come to us that they're looking to buy a business.
Yep.
Basically, I say, have you looked at the tax returns from the business?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they say, why do I need that? I said, you got to be kidding me.
It's the same. It's the same reason that Kendro wants to see your tax returns for the past 3 years.
Yeah.
You know, and so you want to do that. So now it's like you have to almost put on the hat as the person who wants to acquire the business as like a banker.
Right.
We're like, or do you fit the needs? Like, does your business fit the needs that I'm looking for?
Right. I had a client that was looking to buy a laundromat. Okay. For some reason, I've got about a half a dozen of those clients. I don't know why everyone's into laundromats all of a sudden.
I'm getting some of
We'll
those
get a
too,
washing
actually.
machine. But so I said, did you get the tax returns yet? And he says, no, I'm actually going through a broker. I said, okay, but you still want to see the tax returns. I'll look them over for you if you want, as your business advisor. He says, well, we were told that he shows losses every year because it's a cash business. I said, well,
sounds like a great investment.
you're not going to be able to get a loan.
yeah.
That's all there is to it. You can't
Because
have
then
your
that's
cake and eat it too.
exactly what you're going to look at.
Yeah, that's exactly.
You're going to be.
I'll take it a step further. Sometimes that you have people that are experienced in these industries, and there are nuances to the industry. I remember talking to a gentleman a couple of years ago, and he wanted to buy a pizza shop, and I'm like, okay, great. I'm just going to need to see the tax returns. He's just like, I'll send you the tax returns. It's showing losses, but I can tell, like I'm parked outside. I see how many boxes are coming out, and I can tell that it's, generating revenue, and he's doing this. And I'm like, sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
We're still not making a profit.
Yes. Yeah. We need tax returns. We're a financial institution.
So is it the same kind of thing then for the business? We ran through the example of up and running, 4 years, 5th year is not so great, and we're looking for that money. Is it the same kind of thing that if somebody is convinced? I actually have a client right now. I don't want, because this is like a very active situation. I don't want to give too many details. But I have an active client right now who is in that boat. It's him and his brother, but the ownership isn't necessarily perfectly clear. But it's the brother has an immense amount of expertise in this field, and he also has let's just say he's well connected with current clients.
Okay.
Like he's working like a side job doing this thing. And then I made them walk me through, and I was like, no. I'm not even going to send this to a bank because the business that they're looking to acquire has been showing downward. It was profitable, but then the margin shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, and now it's negative. Why do you want this?
Yes. Yeah.
And then so they start talking about like location and the guy's doing these things wrong. And I'm like, I need more. Like we need to have a sit down, full on conversation about this.
Yeah.
And then they broke down. He's like, listen, I can cut this many dogs a day, right? And this place was mixed messaging. They were selling dogs and they were grooming. All we want to do is groom.
Okay.
But I have the expertise, and I know how to do this, and I know that I can get these supplies for this much through these suppliers, and then it'll work like that. And so at the end of it, it's like, this is how we're going to be profitable. And they actually had like a very clear cut plan and understanding. And I was like, now we can have a conversation, right? Like that's where the difference gets made. So is that kind of what you guys are looking for, in the sense like if somebody's going to come up and it's not necessarily ideal?
Well, that makes sense, right? And that's great for a go forward basis, right? That the projections, assumptions, that's how the loan is going to get repaid in the future. The problem that SBA is going to have is because there needs to be a valuation or justification for the loan amount, right? So let's just say it's $100,000 to buy that business, but you're operating at a loss. We're going to do a business valuation. Well, we can include some add backs, things of that nature. But at the end of the day, what are you buying? You know,
Mhm.
you're not buying the potential future revenue that you can generate.
Got it.
You're buying the
Existing.
historical.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
that's what the business's value is. You know,
And if you're running at a loss, that value's
Right.
Yeah.
going down.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
You know, they have to justify the price
yes,
of the purchase of the business.
yeah.
And so then you can use that in a negotiation as a leveraging tool to negotiate the price down. Potentially.
You could.
But yeah, you could. But you know, again, if there are losses, then the price is zero. You know, so how?
it's a good
Now
point.
it's one thing
Yeah.
if they're buying. Let's just say if there was equipment, right? So
Okay.
you have the business. You know, goodwill is maybe there might be some goodwill. You know, but you've got that, but you've got equipment. Let's just say it's very equipment. You know,
Orientated.
orientated.
Mhm.
So then we'll do evaluation on the equipment, and depending on where that's coming in at, you know, that's really where the funds are going to.
Okay.
You know,
Right.
but maybe they can maybe right. What could be an option is maybe there's some type of like seller's note or something like that.
Mhm.
Jeff, did you have any sort of questions about business acquisitions or any sort of input that you wanted to add to this?
With business acquisitions, you have to take a look at what industry they're in. Really, you know, a lot of clients that I speak to, they want to buy a cash type business, and I try to discourage them from doing something like that. You know, with today's technology, they could figure it out whether you're pocketing a ton of money. Give you an example. Pizza place. I mean, the first thing they're going to do is say, all right, I want to see how many boxes you bought in the year, how much dough you bought in the year, and they're going to figure out how many pies were being purchased. And if you're not near that, if you're 50% of that, so why'd you have to buy all that stuff? You know, there's ways, and that's New York State sales tax will come down on you.
Yeah.
They're the ones that do that. They target cash business industries every year. My cousin was a New York State sales tax auditor, and every year it was a different target.
All right, Kendro, is there any sort of advice that you would give to, I mean, pick your poison, to somebody that's in a startup that's considering, you know, starting their own business, or a business that's looking to expand or get a loan?
Yeah, I absolutely love people who are looking to buy the existing businesses that they're working at.
Yeah.
Right, or they're working
Yep.
for. That is, oh my goodness.
That's such a
I
nice
need
transaction.
A napkin right now to without salivating. Like that's
Really.
that is awesome. Like it doesn't get any better
Yeah.
from a
Because
business
not only do
acquisition
you understand
standpoint.
the industry, but that specific business,
You know the
itself.
customers, you know things that could, you know, turn things around if that's needed. You know, so it's you have so much inside.
Kendro is advocating hostile takeovers.
Yes.
Go to a business. No,
Work
not
there
really,
for
not really,
15
not really.
years.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then
The long
The
game,
long
right?
con, the long No, but that's a good point. So if you, I mean, and this goes to, I mean, a little bit even more generalized advice. If you're thinking about, if you're in a position, I just got a call from a college student that was like, I want to start a business. I don't care what it is. I just want to start one.
Mhm.
And then, so that's when we start talking about passions. They're like, no, it's about time. And I was like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
No, it's
yeah.
not. Like, figure out what it is that you're interested in and spend some time, like, getting into things that you're, and realize that you're like, I'm not that interested into it.
Yeah.
You know, but then you figure it out, and then if you find a good place that's, you know, obviously that's not a huge name business or something, and you can get in there and work on the inside and start to develop the relationships
Yeah.
and understand how it works.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not like a guarantee that someday you're going to be able to buy it, but it's on the table, and
Yeah.
and you're getting industry experience. It was really great to have you on, and thank
Thanks
you
for
for
having
sharing all of this information. I think this is going to be so helpful for people in all of these different various stages of the business kind of life cycle.
Mhm. Mhm.
If people wanted to get in touch with you specific, because they're like, man, I like Kendro now. Kendro's good people. They want to get in touch with you or work with you. How would they make that happen?
Yeah, sure. So my email is Kendro, Kendro, Benjamin, Benjamin,
It should be on the screen. If not, we have failed in editing.
at dime.com. So feel free to email me there.
Perfect. And what was just the one last thing? What is the spread of Dime? Like, if people wanted to just work with Dime itself?
Oh
or
yeah,
get
so
interested?
we are about a $12 billion regional bank, from about 59 locations from Montauk to Manhattan.
Thank
Yeah.
you again.
Yep.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Jeff. I
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it.